are somewhat emotional and not always entirely fact-based. And if we want to have a constructive discussion around the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa, we really need to make sure that we establish the fact base, that we actually do the research, that we create a common platform of the real issues at hand. That yes, there will always be emotions involved, and there should be emotions involved if people are involved. But we need to make sure that those don't completely distort the conversation in a particular direction. So we want a rational, fact-based discussion. And then the final point that where we're coming from is we often, when you have a conversation about the fourth industrial revolution, we always zoom into the tech and we start talking about the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and big data, which is fine because without that there would be no fourth industrial revolution. But the fourth industrial revolution will affect everyone. It will affect people, it will affect businesses, it will affect society, it will affect government, it will affect politics. And therefore the conversation around the fourth industrial revolution needs to focus not so much on the tech as on the impact of that tech in the world in which we live, as Professor Bibb said. So that's where we're coming from. And what we therefore said is what we aspire to do as the FIRSA partnership is to stimulate an inclusive fact-based dialogue to help shape a coherent national response to the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa. Let me unpack a few of those words, because some of the words I've already discussed, but some are quite important. It has to be inclusive. As I said, the fourth industrial revolution will affect everybody. So we can't have a select subset of South Africa having the conversation. There needs to be a conversation which includes everybody. You'll notice we've got the words a national response, not a strategy or a plan or anything like that. Because a response is a more active word. It says we actually do something about it. We respond. It's not a case of let's all have a really cool, intellectually stimulating and satisfying discussion, sit in a room, develop a document, put it on the shelf. It has to translate then into responding to that. So it is important for us that it is a response. Let me quickly take a bit of a detour into this term, the fourth industrial revolution. And some people have said, this is a particular framing of the future. Is it necessarily the right one? And you could talk about the Japanese notion of society 5.0, or the more American notion of digitalization. Well, what is absolutely undeniable is that we are living through an era of unprecedented technological disruption. And the term fourth industrial revolution is one that captures that in a particular way. So we don't particularly mind whether you call it society 5.0, fourth industrial revolution, digitalization. They all mean pretty much the same thing. We've chosen the term fourth industrial revolution because it does capture it and everybody understands what you're talking about. Our focus is South Africa. You know, we are part of a continent, and it's really important that we engage with our neighbors and, in fact, our global partners. But what we have influence over, what we can hope to impact, is South Africa, and that is where our focus is. So our approach, as I mentioned, is more human-centered than tech-centered. It is inclusive and diverse, it's fact-based. But let me unpack a few of those other words. We believe if you want to have a conversation which leads towards progressive coherence and convergence, then it needs to be structured. We need to provide some framework that we can hang all the different components of the fourth industrial revolution on. And I'll be sharing with you our thematic framework and the structure that we are proposing. We do need to create open platforms for the conversation. Open platforms in the modern technological sense, that it will be a portal where people can load content, access content, interact, engage with each other. But also platforms in the old-fashioned sense, like this, a workshop, a colloquium, a symposium, a conference. Those are also platforms for the exchange of ideas and for conversations. We believe that for it to move forward, it will have to be supported and facilitated, that the content needs to be curated. And it's that second last bullet here that FIRSA would see as our primary sort of ongoing material contribution, is to provide a supported, facilitated, curated platform for this conversation. So if that's our aspiration and approach, Who do we need to involve? I mentioned it's got to be inclusive, so clearly government, a broad cross-section of the departments and institutions, industry, a cross-section of industry, but we've pulled out small business and entrepreneurs because in many cases their considerations, their concerns, their imperatives are very different to those of established industry. So we have pulled them out as a particular constituency. Obviously labor, academia, civil society, representative NGOs and so on, and international organizations like the World Economic Forum, the International Labour Organization, and of course the media, who are critical in helping move the conversation in the country forward, as well as, of course, being an important part of industry as an industry player. I mentioned that we proposing a sort of a structure for the conversation. The way we think about it, we've got 5 themes. The first is this one of competition, competitiveness, concentration, and inequality. Now, clearly, one of the primary things we are wanting to ensure through the dialogue is to ensure that South Africa remains and becomes even more competitive in the global digital economy. But at the same time, we need to balance that. There's almost a triple contradiction that we have to manage. Because we have to do that, we have to create what we call superstar firms. But at the same time, global evidence suggests that emerging economies prosper best when there's really vigorous, intense competition at a domestic level. But thirdly, in South Africa, we do have to recognize we have to create space and opportunities for small and micro enterprise, particularly from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. So how do we balance this need to create superstar firms, a highly competitive domestic economy, and creating space for newcomers? And the other thing about this is what evidence is starting to suggest globally, that the more digital the economy becomes, the more concentrated it becomes. So how do we avoid South Africa becoming more and more concentrated? Because with concentration comes inequality. So how do we balance this issue that we've got to be competitive, but we don't want to become too concentrated because we can't afford inequality getting any worse? We're starting, as we all know, from very high levels of inequality. The fourth industrial revolution needs to make that better, not worse. The second theme flowing out of this, and it relates to the previous one, is this whole issue of employment and jobs. When there are some fairly lurid projections out there about 40% of jobs or 60% of jobs will be impacted. Some people say that's fine, but we're going to create another whole lot of jobs. And the fact is, for South Africa, the research is very thin. And what is important for us is that we understand, A, the impact of this on jobs, but more, how we actually manage the migration from the previous skills of the economy to the next set of skills in the economy, and different modes of employment and different ways of working. Another really important theme is the changing nature of the relationship between the individual, society, government, and business. For example, there's a lot of talk, it's very topical at the moment, this whole issue of social scoring and the ethical dimensions of social scoring. But at the same time, there's issues in South Africa about digital literacy. There's issues of fostering trust in the digital economy. There's issues about challenges for democracy, where we're already seeing alienation and high levels of polarization in the political discourse globally. There's new issues in frontiers and safety and security. These are critical conversations for the country, we believe, and we want to help those conversations take shape. It is important that any process like this does look forward with an optimistic view, and therefore looks to grasp the opportunities that present themselves. Opportunities, whether they are in enhancing access of small and medium businesses to global value chains, whether there are opportunities in finding global export sectors, or finding what are going to be the high growth segments in the global economy 5 and 10 years from now, and positioning ourselves to make sure that we play in those. Opportunities in transforming education, opportunities in transforming healthcare. And then finally, it is important that we have an honest conversation about the critical success factors. So getting the basics right in terms of execution of policy, the right policy frameworks, getting the right macros in place in terms of the economy, getting sector productivity growth, even without the fourth industrial revolution, needs to move forward. How do we get SMBs to have a greater share of the South African economy?
In the workshops we've had, the one thing that comes out every single time is skills. Skills, education, and training. And how do we get the basics right there? And then finally, what are the ecosystems we need to really work on? So what we call here the technology fabrics, of course, connectivity, the cost of connectivity, data centers. What is the physical fabric? Because as we have found out with the electricity challenges we've been having, old-fashioned infrastructures still matter, and they matter a lot. So it's roads, electricity, harbors, ports, and so on. What is the financial ecosystem that we need? It's really difficult to create digital inclusion if you don't have financial inclusion. How do we enable people to transact across our society? What are our payment rails and so on? And then finally, what's the innovation fabric? The role of the universities in fostering innovation, the role of business. Where do we find alternative ways of funding and venture capital, accelerators, incubators such as this? The role of government. What is the right innovation fabric? Intellectual property regimes and so on. And what can we learn from other people in the world? So this is our framework for thinking about it. Our process, and I'm going to go through this very quickly, we started in about July last year, as I said. We formulated the framework, and now we're in the process of broadening participation. We've had 5 sector workshops, which I'll share with you on the next slide. We are engaging with industry, labor, and so on to broaden the participation. We are starting to put the research structure and content structure together, and we've established the discussion platform. And now the really important next step is the Digital Economy Summit, which is scheduled for the end of June, where we want to build alignment and start growing participation and alignment to elevate the profile of the process, to agree the areas, the critical focus areas for discussion and the framework for further work. After that, of course, we will elaborate the work. We'll move towards a later summit to say what do we actually do about this, and then towards execution. But for today, the primary point that we want to say, the next step, the next major milestone in the journey is the Digital Economy Summit in June. We did, let me build this slide very quickly. So as I mentioned, we've already had 5 sector workshops. We've had about 300 people come through a whole lot of sector workshops with very high levels of engagement and participation. We started last November with a public sector workshop. In January, we had an ICT sector workshop. And in February and March, we've tried to combine ecosystems. So, for example, mining, manufacturing, heavy transport, electricity, and so on. Then we had what we'd call the foodstuffs. And this ranges, we always call it from grape to glass almost. It's from agriculture through to food manufacturing, through to food distribution, and food retailing, and a discussion of that ecosystem about how does the 4th Industrial Revolution affect and how should we respond. And similarly, business and financial services, heavily weighted towards financial services, but a broader financial services ecosystem. So this is the journey we're on. This is the conversation we are having. And from our perspective, we know that there's still lots of other communities to engage with. So for example, healthcare, education, safety and security, the media, there's lots. But we've made the start, and we are on the journey towards the Digital Economy Summit. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of this today. We really do invite you to become part of this conversation, become part of the journey. Please join us on it, and let's enrich the discussion collectively, because no small team of 4 people or 5 academics or 10 industry partners can do it alone. It has to be a national conversation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution, but we need to start moving in a direction. So how do we come together to create a national dialogue? It has to be inclusive. As I
Solidarity, COSATU, the SACP, essentially framing the question around how ready are we as a country, and especially them as representatives of citizens, how ready are they in integrating the implications of a very changing world in regards to policy, regulation, and everything else that goes with it. So those conversations actually were well received by all of the parties, actually, all of them. And we clearly did not have the ability to convene a multi-stakeholder forum. And the three gentlemen were very, very gracious to agree. I remember I called them on a Sunday morning. I didn't know what I was going to do. We published an open letter, which was a bit of a challenge. And then after that, I kind of thought, oops, what's going to happen? So called Adam, called Tsilidzi, and subsequently as well engaged with Professor Buhlungu around how can we get them to facilitate the effort for us to go forward. And I'm very, very pleased that a lot of work has been done. But this is not the end, and it should be probably the beginning of really crafting the right response. A lot of work has been done, a lot of workshops have been held, and very soon I'll hand over a report to the minister. But I suppose just to underscore the point, the challenge, at least as I see it, is how do we solve real problems that are there? How do we really solve problems that are there? How do we solve problems of backwardness, problems of disease, problems of illiteracy, problems of access? Because if we sit here and we have a very intelligent conversation and people still get very ill and people still are backward and still people are illiterate, then we have not solved practical problems that human beings have to deal with on a daily basis. And I truly, truly urge government, the universities, and everybody else who becomes a partner to this, that there are real issues that the country is confronted with, and we need to find ways and means in which we can leverage technology to be able to make a difference. And in that way, as people move forward and as people make progress in their lives, then we can be able to judge if we've made progress. So today we'll hand over a report that illustrates the work that has been done. But the report is not an illustration of success. It is a report. And hopefully it's the execution of the things that are in the report, hopefully that will move us forward. So we remain committed, and I think Brian mentioned it earlier on, it's an open platform. We contribute the best way that we can, but every business, and one of the things I've committed myself is to give a call to almost every CEO to be able to support this effort, hopefully in cash, not kind, hopefully in cash, not kind. So that this work can be done and can be broadened, not just to be in Joburg, but to be in Alice, where Forte is based, and have an impact there, to be in Limpopo, to be in the Northern Cape, so that the entire country feels the full effect of the fourth industrial revolution. So with those words, Minister, I have to hand you this report. I'm informed it's the only copy that's there. So please receive it and use it. All of the best. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you can go back. So I'll hand back to the MC. I don't have slides, so I'm done. Where is he? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sipho. Before we have our panel discussion, the Minister is going to, already did, and I like telling stories about what technology is doing, so I'm going to tell another short one, because I think it's beautiful that we know what we're capable of with what we're doing here.
Citizens, how ready are they in integrating the implications of a very changing world in regards to policy?
It's thinly stretched, and very little work can be done in terms of fixing that, given how much infrastructure needs to be put in place. And so there was a young startup company that approached the government and subsequently worked for the government. And what they do is they make use of drone technology to deliver medication to people in the rural south of Kenya. So for those who don't know what drone technology is, presumably 75 years old, it's a little aircraft. It's not really an aircraft, but it's a little aircraft that you can attach things to, and it flies for a distance to exactly where you want it to go, and it drops it off for you. It's door-to-door delivery. And subsequently to that, the hospitals, the larger hospitals in the urban areas in Kenya, now do not admit as many sick patients as they used to because of the use of this technology. That means the strain that was there on public healthcare facilities has been reduced significantly. Can you guys imagine what that would do for Braamfontein Hospital? It would dramatically change our access to healthcare. And these are the types of roles that are beautiful and that make us excited about the work we do in technology and the fourth industrial revolution. And to the people who put this together, Mr. Sipho, thank you very much for that open letter. That letter changed the tone of the conversation in the country, and I think that's exactly what we need. Let's give him a round of applause for the letter. Are being all around? All right? Oh, there you are. Oh yeah, join us on stage. Join us on stage. Yeah. And just before Aya starts the panel discussion, he's going to welcome on stage the Minister. And the Minister is going to do an acceptance and an introduction, and then Aya Benga will begin the conversation, the panel discussion. Thank you very much. Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, welcome on stage.
You know, Minister, before Oliver takes his seat there, he threw me a challenge while I was sitting down there, and he said, that you pay YouTube creators as much as you pay the SABC. Now, the difficulty for me is that I'm an employee of the SABC, so, as I stand here, it's going to be quite a tough one. But I must also say to Oliver that, in many ways, the SABC reaches where data doesn't necessarily reach, Mr. Maseko. It reaches Otol or many of the other areas that oftentimes we don't think about. And so I guess as we move towards the fourth industrial revolution, let's also create some space for my employer as well. Minister, at this point, allow me to introduce you and give you the opportunity also to tell us about some of the latest developments that have been happening. We heard, of course, in the news cycle about the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, and I certainly hope that you can introduce some of the members of that commission to us. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Aya, and good morning to you all. I am Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, as I've been introduced. I am currently serving as the Minister responsible for communications and everything under it. I firstly want to take this opportunity to thank the team that initiated this work that we are doing today, or the partnership that we're talking about. And of course, thank the CEO of Telkom for being so bold that he decided not to talk to us, the shareholder, or anyone, but decided to write an open letter to say, hey, I'm making noise, hear me. But nevertheless, you got our attention, because it is in 2017 going to 2018 when we also realized that, you know what, we've been saying we're leading as government, but there's certain things that we've not been able to do, and therefore, what is it that we need to do? The entire society is going digital. The entire industry is transforming. Our people are losing jobs. What is it that we're not doing well? Every time when we talk about our policies, people say South Africa is the greatest policies. But again, there's no implementation, people complain. What may be the challenge? The first thing that we identified, of course, I had to first declare myself as the commander. A new revolution needs to have a commander. So we're like, oh, there is this fourth industrial revolution, revolution that is there. Everybody is buzzing. I mean, like, everybody who's not even going to be able to define it, but I will tell you about it. So, like, there's a need for a commander. And the reason we said that, because we said we have learned from the past that if there's any revolution that is not guided, that is not coordinated, things tend to get messy. And we did not want that for South Africa. And if we talk about the past, we've seen in cases where, in most cases, actually, our people were not just consumers, but they also were overtaken by the technologies. As everybody that has spoken here saying that the focus must be at the center, and the center must be the people. How do we utilize these technologies to make sure that people can have an enabling environment to enhance their day-to-day life? How does it change my mother's home, seated in her own village, Mtata, on your way to Qunu? That's where I come from, Esakel. And she's seated at home wanting to buy electricity, and for her to buy electricity, she must get in a taxi, and the taxi is 60 rands, just single. Therefore, it's 120 rands for her to go to town, buy electricity, and come back. But now, of course, because she has access to the cell phone, she's able to buy electricity sitting at home. How do we make sure that we make them to be part of this and understand that it's not about technology, but about changing our people's lives? The first thing that we did during our budget vote speech 2018, we then declared that as the department, we want to lead the skills revolution in the 4IR. And so we took that conscious decision, we came up with a very ambitious plan, and people were like, what is this crazy girl doing now? Because we said we want to train about 1 million young people on data science and related skills. We didn't know where to start, professors, let me tell you. We knew that in your universities, you're doing lots of work, but we're like, okay, now we've made this announcement. What's going to happen? What's next? We got on Twitter. We got to LinkedIn. We went to Facebook, YouTube. We were harassing everybody that mentions data science. You talk about coding, we harassed everybody, we DM'd, and then we said there's a need for us to establish the 4IR Skills Forum. And indeed, we invited everybody. Of course, as you would know that under the ministry, we have a training institute which is called NEMISA. And fortunately for us, NEMISA has footprint throughout the country with the different universities. If you go to UJ, if you go to WUSU, if you go to UWC, VUT, and other universities. The first thing that we did, we convened a meeting with the VCs of those universities to say, the dynamics are changing. You are producing lots of skills, but here are still the challenges. We're not saying people in South Africa are not qualified, but there's a skills mismatch. How do we make sure that we bridge that gap so that we can be able to contribute towards what the market requires? We had a dialogue, we agreed there's a need that we must change. And of course, upon engagements, as we interact, I come across the CEO of Telkom, and then he tells me of this thing that they are doing, and I'm like, come on, Sip. You could have spoken to us. We would have told you that this is what we're also doing. We join hands. I'm telling you this because I want to show you when we don't talk to each other, that we end up duplicating things, but most importantly, we're not able to collaborate. And as the department, we then decided that our focus and theme will be coordinate, collaborate, execute 4IR. That's why we said when we had off the partnership, we said, there's no way we're going to miss out. We're going to be part of that partnership. And of course, we had to make sure that we bring government on board. We went to government and said, there are these people that are beacons of hope. Because in most cases, when people are learned, they tend to monopolize the knowledge. They tend to be selfish and not want to share that they know for the development of the society that educated or made them to be learned. So when we had people who said, we have experience, we are involved, we understand our responsibility of changing and influencing the society, and therefore we're going to use our expertise and our time to make sure that we create a dialogue. We said we want to be part of that dialogue. That's why we are here today. And of course, you have heard that President Ramaphosa then, during his first SONA last year, he then announced that he's going to establish the Presidential Commission. Of course, people have been looking forward to it. But even they, it took so long and people didn't understand. Because we're like, people are looking at 4IR as the technology or ICT mad. And reality is that it can be, as we have already heard from the speakers that are here. As we're talking about the emergence of all these technologies, there's energy crisis on the other side. There's people from agriculture, people must eat, the economy, this and that affects all. But most importantly, there's that matters that we cannot be able to deliver effectively in this 4IR if there's no digital inclusion. And it goes back to saying, Shamia, are our people able to communicate? Is it affordable? Are these services accessible? Are they available to our people? Because they're not meant for the elite. Hence we talk of digital inclusion. If we are to say, as the ANC government in South Africa, we want to make sure that we put South Africa there. We need to make sure we are in the top 20 ranking, Brian. And that we can do as government. We can have the desire to do so, but it is you and the people of South Africa that can be able to make sure that your own country occupies a rightful place where it belongs. As we did that, we said, let's put measures in place. Things happened, there's disruptions everywhere. President Ramaphosa decided to disrupt government, and of course, and then you got myself as your Black Friday gift. And of course, we welcome the gift. And as things happened, Minister Gole had started on some work in terms of introducing certain policies. We sat down and said, is this enough? Or do we need to change the policies that we have, the legislations, the regulations? Are they taking into consideration all of these things that we're talking about in the 4IR? For example, if we were to talk about my sector, everything that we've produced is based-driven. It's voice-driven. And now we're talking of a data-centric market that we need to respond to. How do we make sure that we then try to convince our comrades, colleagues, and the society that there is a need for a complete overhaul of the legislations if we were to enhance innovation, if we were to make sure that those things that were listed here are fully realized, things have to change. And indeed, we made our submission to the Cabinet Lekgotla that, fortunately for us, welcomed the ideas and gave us the mandate to say, yes, go and partner with your 4IR as a partnership. We're giving you blessings. Go and do that you have to do if it is for the benefit of this country. As the ANC government, we're fully behind it. That is why we stand here. Yesterday, I had to go to President and tell him, Mr. President, tomorrow we will be having a media launch of the Digital Economy Summit, because we had to talk to Cabinet about the importance of that. Because for us, again, to be able to deliver on the 4IR, there's a need for digital transformation, as you have said. But government has to take lead, because the industry can innovate and come up with all the great ideas, but if the regulations and the laws are not supportive of that, or are stifling that innovation, we're not going to achieve that we want to achieve. So getting government's blessing and support was something that we really needed on our side, so that by the time we come as the department to this partnership, we know that the entire government is involved. Having engaged, of course, with the CEO and the members of the team, we had said, all right, now President has said he's going to appoint a commission. How do you make sure that they work together? I said our mantra is coordinate in order to collaborate for effective execution of the 4IR. Coordinate, collaborate, execute 4IR. Now we had said, I put pressure because we had to undergo all the security things that we did. You know that you nominated people to serve in the Presidential Commission last year, and people were eager to say, who are these commissioners? President, again, this year in his honor said, I have appointed. And people are like, we want to know. And we're like, be patient. Watch the space. We're going to give it to you. And as that happens, of course, we had to make sure that we are detailed and thorough on everything. You've seen that what has been happening with Agrezi. And we needed to make sure that we protect the integrity of government in terms of the people that we appoint. Of course, it doesn't mean that the devil is not there watching for them to falter and then he devours them. It happens, they are human. But nevertheless, we have to do the basics of trying to check, hey, Papa, where is your conflict here? And. So that by the time we're saying you come and advise government, we know that you're not advising us based on your interests. You advise us on the basis that you want to take South Africa to a higher level in the 4IR that we're talking about, so that all those things that they spoke about are realized. Because at the end of the day, it's about people being able to derive an economic spin-off in everything that we do. People must be employed. Those that are innovators must be able to commercialize their activities. He was talking about drone technology. Even up to date, if I have anyone from aviation here, even now we have not issued commercial licenses, which is a dialogue again that we need. As much as we say in Kenya does this, as South Africa, I have the post office that is in my interest to make sure that we digitize it. And if we were to do it, people are complaining about the delays in terms of the delivery time frames. And don't you think that drones can help me bridge that gap? So these are the things that we're saying, as much as we want to go with everything that is happening, but we've got to make sure that we build that capacity first. Let us make sure that the workforce will be ready for it, so that we don't have to be fighting with labor, fighting with whoever, because when those fights happen, it always has negative impact on the economy. Doesn't only affect families, but it affects the entire country. So it's important that we work together. Let us make sure that we're inclusive as much as we can, which is what we have tried to do in the 4IR Commission. Of course, Professor Marwala, other people are not happy that they're not part of it. I want to apologize if you were nominated and you didn't make it. Please know that we're still going to have the work streams. There's space for everyone. You're going to play your part like any patriotic South African and African to make sure that your country takes the rightful place in the space that we're talking about. As I'm here talking to you right now, I mentioned earlier the importance of digital inclusion. We have a team that is in Eastern Cape as I'm speaking to you, in Ndabangulu. I don't know how many of you know about Ndabangulu. If you don't know it, Google it. Ndabangulu is one of the poverty nodal areas that were identified here in this country. We normally have our annual walks. We term them the youth walks into economic opportunities. We're tired of coming, we have exhibition, people give people flyers. We want people to experience what we're talking about. We dispatch teams, of course, we're not doing it as just government alone, as I said. One thing about us as the ANC government is that we believe that it is only when we work together that we can do more. So we partnered with those that were willing to partner with us. We're rolling out 3D printing training in Ndabangulu. We made sure that, as he spoke about YouTube, that people have access to digital communication skills. It's happening in Ndabangulu. Lots of things have been happening throughout the week. I am mentioning this because we tend to think and want to focus at times in the areas where we believe that they drive our profits. We miss one thing, that for as long as people have access to your product, you would have created a demand. People are not utilizing your product because it is not available to them. And also the issue of affordability that I spoke about. So taking these skills that people think that they must come here in Joburg for them to access, taking them to where people are, is also easing the burden away from the Gauteng province that must have each and everybody coming here. And that becomes a fiscal nightmare again. So we're doing this because we believe that it doesn't matter if you're in a rural area, you're coming from a poor family, but this era that we're in, the digital era that we're in, it's so borderless, full of opportunities that even if SABC does not commission you, it doesn't matter. You can share your content with Kenyans and whoever that want access to your content. As Prof said, that we've got to tell our stories the way they are, not how people want to see them. Because it is through that process of us telling our stories the way they are that people get to be informed, and as they are informed, they begin to develop interest to say, we think we can build on this story and get something tangible out of it. So thank you so much for making sure that you kickstart the dialogue. And as I said, I'm a newlywed, as you know. When we make the vows, until death do us part, you know, like any newlywed, you're looking forward to that dying. You don't think about anything else. Even if it comes at times, I'm like, hey, devil, stay away. I'm not moving here. That's how we're going to be to yourselves, founders of this partnership. You stuck with us. It doesn't mean that we're going to agree at all times. At times we will not agree because we're looking at different things, but what's important is for us not to lose focus and what is that we want to achieve. As part of sharing ideas in terms of what is it that needs to be done, of course, I did say that we'll have different ideas. We just want to plead with you to be tolerant towards us. I did say that we are talking about the 4IR, but we do not know it. So it becomes your responsibility to say, this is what we mean about 4IR. And therefore, as a person who's responsible for legislation, this is the kind of an MP that we need, and a policymaker and a regulator. Because the fact that we occupy the positions, it doesn't mean that we have your knowledge. This is why we appeal to yourselves to say, let's join hands. We have our own strengths, we have our own capabilities, and you have yours. But when we work together, we're able to then produce the best that we can produce. Ladies and gentlemen, it was already mentioned that on Tuesday, the announcement of the commissioners was made, and of course, the host had already decided to introduce one of them. I know why. I would like to introduce them to yourselves, those that are here. We have invited that because we've got to work together. You have seen the terms of reference that they've got to make sure that they advise and coordinate the work around 4IR in our country, not in government. I saw also that was emphasized. This has to be a country's, okay, Brian says not a plan. We've been saying a country's plan, and then he says a country's response. Of course, I was also cautious about the plan because I was like, we have a tendency of coming up with 20-year plans. What's going to happen when the tech space, things change every day. Now, if we have a 20-year plan that everybody must subscribe, what's going to happen? But I guess the response would work better. But out of that, we do not want a situation where we have the country's response and we don't have sectoral responses, just like we did with the NDP. I said we are 25 years in government and we have learned certain things, and out of that we're taking others and we're dropping others because we're now adults. That's why we're saying we have the NDP that is there, but my take as Stella Prof is that we could have done more if we had allowed the sectors to develop their own plans in response to the national plan. And that's what we're going to do with the response, the country's response on 4IR, that we're going to have this country plan, okay, the country response, and then sectors must come up with their own responses that must help us achieve the objectives that will be set out by the country's plan. And therefore, identifying the role of government in that. Government, this is what we need to do. And as, of course, as the leader of the 4IR in government, I go back and say, this is where we must go to. This is what we must do from transport, from energy from everybody that is affected. As I said, key to that is the development of the digital transformation strategy that we have already drafted, but we're still canvassing with our sister departments. Ladies and gentlemen, the people that were appointed, we received about 500 plus nominations. That's how people are so keen to heed the call Gatumamina Kamongamel, and we really appreciate that. But out of that, we had to come up with 30. As you know, the commission is going to be chaired by the president, and the deputy chairperson, as announced, Professor Chulis Marola. I would like them to rise as I introduce them so that you can see them. Dr. Jata from the Witwatersrand University, Dr. Sibongiseni Totsejane, Dr. Nompumelelo Oboko, Dr. Michael Gostro, Mr. Shamil, Mr. Mati, Shamaine, Bakolile, Beth Farenze, Nom Sokana, Lindy Wemkonza, Lindy Wematlali, Abdul, Rendani, Ramabulana, Carl Vonowela, Gerard van de Venter. I believe those are the ones that were able to join us for today. Others were not able to make it, as it was a short notice. We want to thank you for accepting to serve your own country and seeing the need once more to say government can't do it alone. You do know that it was mentioned that Deloitte is part of the founders. Of course, as ourselves as the department, we had said, we want to do things differently as the department to make sure that we do not just come up with policies that are looking inwardly, what we want to achieve, but to make sure that we let the industry drive the work that it's supposed to do, but ours ensure that the policy assists them to achieve that we want for the country, but of course, because they have a crucial role to play. So we had said we're going to try to have dialogues, whether they are quarterly, with the different industry players, just for us to talk about the things and where do they think we must go to in terms of changing things, both in Parliament, regulator, and in the department. Of course, after May 9 and May 25, we will be then introducing the new people that will be making laws. And we want to appeal to yourselves once more, founders, and the commission, to make sure that we prepare ourselves to have workshops for the legislators, for the judiciary, and then we can then expand it to the society. It's very important so that we don't get to be delayed. We come up with recommendations, as I'm going to go through the report, and I don't know what are the recommendations that are there, as we have accepted it, and the commission will be making recommendations to say there's a need for this. But if those things do not find expression in the law and the policies, they won't change anything that we want to change in our country. So it's important that immediately as they are sworn in on as members of parliament, May 25 inauguration, that's the only time I'm losing my job. So between now and then, you're still stuck with me. And then May 25, inauguration of the president, and then 26, president announces cabinet, and then we have to continue. Remember, it doesn't matter who will be there. You are there to advise government. So don't mind the faces. Just stick to the mandate that you have to do. And as I said, the FYR as a partnership will be assisting us also in the contents of that. And also, as we have read the president's statement when they were announcing the commission, they made mention of the fact that we will be doing induction for the commissioners, and we are preparing for that. But of course, as I said, the schedules are very hectic. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell you that President Ramaphosa is committed in making a difference in our country, playing his part, just because God has given him an opportunity to lead now. And he has made a resolve, or taken a resolve, that everybody who will be serving in his team has to share that vision. But he then, again, raised something very important, that this is not a vision that must belong to government. the vision that we must share must be a South African vision, which is why we're calling upon yourselves to talk to us. Those dialogues are very important for us to understand each other's vision, and therefore that will become the country's vision. And as I say that, allow me to tell you that the ANC government loves you so much, and we wish you all the best until we meet again. Of course, the report is accepted.
Let's give the Minister a round of applause. And for the love, I guess, that the ANC government has. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess I was amiss when I came up here earlier by not introducing myself. And there's all manner of contraptions in front of me. Unlike Oliver, I must say I'm not as ageist as he is. I'm quite close to his age as well. I'm a few years shy of the age of 30. But I want to maybe share just a brief anecdote, which I think, because I'm not ageist, many of the people who are a bit older in the room would relate to. So I came across this doing some research for a book chapter that we're working on BEE. And it was a very interesting conversation about how, in the early days, the first sort of gnashing of the teeth between the National Party government and those at CODESA around the licensing of cellular networks. Now, we know we don't call it a cellular anymore, but you work with me here for a second. Now, at the time, what had happened was the National Party government had unilaterally given MTN and Vodacom the cellular license, and in so doing, many of those in the sort of ANC alliance said, no, wait a second here. You can't now, at the tail end of your government, in your last sort of if you're a horse kicking days, want to give away this kind of spectrum. And actually, one of the people, I guess, who raised the alarm also has his own interesting story. It's a guy called Dr. Bernie van der Hoff, and I know he's also in the Commission Minister. Now, this is a guy who was in MIMSA. This is now MIMSA before they left the COSATU. Now in MIMSA. And apparently, he went to these guys and he said, you can't give away the people's spectrum like this. And many of them were asking him, what's this thing of spectrum? Now, weirdly enough, he was a trade unionist, but he was a PhD in physics. So he knew, he thought in spectrum, he did all of this stuff. And so they cut a deal. Of course, a few people sort of would get in on the action. And shortly thereafter, Dr. Ntatu Motla said, you know what? This cellular business, oh man, this thing's not going to make me money. What's important now is for me to make money now. So let me cash out my operation and go buy a stake in the Sowetan. Now, 25 years later, if you compare how much money the telecoms players are making compared to, I guess, Sowetan, which is in the dying days of print, if I can say so, you get a sense of how important it is for us to have a long-term view. It's not just about saying, in the next 5 years, Commissioner, that we want just now, we want a drone factory, DJI, that Chinese company must come and manufacture here, we'll make a quick one and then we're fine. And so allow me at this point as we open the panel to call you back up again onto the stage. I'd also like to call the Vice Chancellors and Principals of the University of Witwatersrand, Gondo College, Professor Sakela Bashlungu, Professor Adam Habib from my own alumnus. So I was trained as an economist at WITS, but I'm a media worker now, as I said. I'm a media worker, I'm also a migrant worker, and I often say to Mark Barnes, we need to fix that post office where I come from as Berlin. And the reason why I say that, I don't know how many of you have been to the post office, I guess even to get a license disc or something like that. When you compare the size of the post office and all of the, I guess, cash points that they have, and how many are functional, I often ask myself, why don't we have and set up a Tshimologong in all of these post offices? There's post offices in every nook or cranny of this country, Minister. And I think we maybe need to think about how we repurpose and refashion some of those, some of that infrastructure. So I'd like to call up the Vice Chancellors, Professor Sakela Ndabeni-Abrahams. I'd also like to call up Professor Tshilizi Mawala from the University of Johannesburg, and also would like to call up, because it is election season, the Tower, Babusipho Masego to the stage. And at this point, I'd also like to call up Minister. Please come up again onto the stage. Do we have enough chairs? Okay. reluctant participant. Reluctant participant. Join the professors, please. As you mic them up, let me also get my directive from my commander. Okay, so I have received my directives, and I would like, certainly at this point, Dr. Masego, I thought you were a reluctant participant.